My message is that to achieve your aspirations, the characteristic or trait you will need to succeed above all other characteristics is resilience. Now, I believe that it's about resilience that Rudyard Kipling wrote the poem If. It starts, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you but make allowance for their doubting too, this to me is about resilience. Now, resilience has attracted the attention of scholars for years, yet a common definition has proved quite elusive. We could define resilience as overcoming stress or difficulty. Some people describe resilience as toughness, a metaphor between resilience in individuals and the elasticity of certain metals likens the properties of malleable metals to the psychological qualities in some individuals that allow them to withstand strain and hardship. Resilience is sometimes defined according to qualities and characteristics. For example, resourcefulness, self-confidence, curiousness, self-discipline, level-headedness, and so on. Resilient individuals are generally intelligent, they say, with a strong sense of self, whilst resilience itself forms positive character skills, including patience, tolerance, responsibility, compassion, and so on. In theories of resilience as a trait, much attention has been given to the idea that a combination of physical and psychological characteristics give individuals the skills to be resilient. Does that mean, therefore, that to become resilient, we must have to undergo negative, traumatic or stressful incidents? Were the people of Haiti resilient only after the earthquake which took their homes and families? Physiologically, human beings have homeostatic mechanisms to foster resilience in the event of physical difficulty such as hemorrhage or stress. On the other hand, psychological resilience is defined as a capacity to move on in a positive way for negative, traumatic or stressful experiences. But are we then just talking about recovery, as if we were recovering from an illness? Resilience can, I think, be differentiated from simple recovery because recovery from an event means that there is a period in which we wouldn't have functioned normally. Resilience, however, means that we need to maintain a state of equilibrium with no loss of normal function. In summary then, the idea of many scholars is that resilience is an adaptive and coping trait. It involves the ability to overcome adversity, and by overcoming adversity, we can achieve anything. Abraham Lincoln said, "You can do anything you want to if you want it badly enough." I'm sure some of our parents, grandparents, friends, family say to us, "If you want it badly enough, there are no limits to what you can do." Well, when I was asked to speak at this TEDx event, it was more than I ever aspired to achieve in my life. More, actually, than I thought I would ever be worth. More than I ever anticipated doing. I find it quite daunting to speak within this community where my thoughts might be tweeted before I have even finished speaking. My daughter would argue that what makes me succeed and counter that nervousness is resilience. I've needed to dig deep and draw on that resilience many times. As my husband and I faced a battle to change the face of employment in the hospitality industry in the small seaside town where we have operated a business for 28 years, it took us the first 3 years to accomplish the task of ensuring staff were not laid off in the winter, but that employers invested in them year on year, keeping their skills and the standard that we wanted to aspire to. Or, as we watched the river flood our beautiful acres of land a week after we had bought it, that's my husband looking askance at the water flooding. We certainly had to dig deep to create resilience around those events. But to achieve anything, no matter how small, we face many challenges. Some of us face those challenges full on. We might find ways round them. We might find alternative strategies to help seek solutions. For many of us, the way appears really hard, tough, strewn with rocks and pebbles upon which we trip up. We may also see others reaching their goals with what we perceive as great ease. But we should not mind what others do. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Nothing we will aspire to is easy, and at many different points in our lives we will need to juggle priorities. Family, friends, work deadlines, illness. We will need to make tough decisions and listen to those who would knock us off our chosen path, because their priorities are not our priorities. We need resilience to get us to our end goal. Today, it appears we face a more cluttered existence than we have ever had. Young people face choices that their parents never envisaged. The complexities of communications and technologies that a generation ago we did not have. A commodities culture that seeks a reliance on income generation, which means more than simply having enough food to eat or a roof over our heads. Today also we have more opportunities to which to aspire. Does this mean then that we need more resilience than those who came before? Or that in this day and age, when what we think we need we just grab and use, climbing and scrabbling to our goals? Or do we need to stop and take a moment to train ourselves to be successful in our aspirations? Aspirations do not have to be about climbing mountains or making huge change or seeking world peace. In our small ways, we all affect the communities we serve, and resilience will be needed to no lesser extent. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If it falls to your lot to be a street sweeper, go out and sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Handel and Beethoven composed music." I argue that we can help ourselves to develop that resilience by seeking mentoring relationships that support and guide us, by achieving life balance and some sort of spirituality to help develop patience, tolerance and compassion, by developing positive emotions that seek to remain in the day and in the future and not dwell on past negatives, by ensuring personal growth and that self-reflection are protected factors in our lives, and by seeking inspiration and motivation from the narratives of resilience which surround us. Resilience is positioned interdependently with adversity. To demonstrate resilience, therefore, questions whether one must first encounter adversity. However, Nelson Mandela showed me an incredible story of resilience in overcoming his period of captivity, and I would argue he was resilient before he undertook his incarceration, or otherwise he would not have survived it. I have grown up in an era which saw families in the UK, even in my small mining town in the northeast of England, that we actually stopped buying oranges from South Africa as our effort to support him as he spent 27 years in prison, 18 of those years on Robben Island, fighting for his aspiration. Nelson Mandela had the resilience and fortitude to continue to aspire to bring equality to a nation, one of the greatest narratives and inspirations in my lifetime. I have watched the evolving battle with Ebola in awe of those who can leave their family and friends and travel to countries ravaged by a disease which could strike them and for which there is no cure. Not only travel to those countries, but to live and work on a daily basis in the most basic of conditions, in the most hostile of environments, an environment that can wreak havoc on physical and emotional strength. Some of you may have read the story of David Pelzer. It's a trilogy of books describing an abused boy's journey to manhood and his help for those who have also had harrowing childhoods. I picked the first book up expecting a novel, and I was traumatised to think any child would have to undergo a life as he did, let alone live to be able to write it down. Or more recently, the publication of Michael Norton's book, Fighting for Redemption, describing his true story. A traumatised small boy who was even hospitalised for malnourishment, yet he grew to manhood to become a Navy SEAL, albeit an extremely damaged one. He survived to write his story and tell his tale. Many of us continue to be haunted every time we hear of another hostage situation. The resilience shown by Terry Waite, John McCarthy and Brian Keenan, who appear, upon their release after what for Terry Waite was 4 years incarceration in some of the most terrible circumstances, to have become so resilient they don't actually blame their captors. Closer to home, I have the privilege to work with the Francis C. Scott Foundation on the Aspiring Leaders programme they have pioneered to help young people across Cumbria and North Lancashire grow and develop into future trailblazers for the social enterprise sector. I was fortunate to meet a young woman with small children who holds down a full-time job, did the Aspiring Leaders course, and yet also volunteers at a rape crisis centre. Or another who, despite also doing the course and wanting so much to succeed, put volunteering for action for children and her neighbour who had terminal cancer above their own personal welfare. And she has now started her own social enterprise to help within their community. Even closer to home, I see my mother as a testament to the power of resilience. Now 97 and a half years old, she was born in Canterbury, Kent, to a father who had met his wife in a time where to be illegitimate was to be a social outcast. He, my grandfather, just saw someone he loved. They were married, and my grandmother bore him 6 children, one who died at age just 5 years old. It broke my grandmother's heart to lose him, but I found out years later it was not being able to bury him in the churchyard because of the stigma surrounding her own birth, which broke my grandmother's resilience. The 3 girls of the family were educated at grammar school and enjoyed their teenage years in Kent. When the war came, each did their bit, one sister joining the RAF. My mother had gone to Teachers' Training College and took up a post in Ealing in London. She bit her lip hard when required to accompany children to the railway station as they travelled to be sent away to the country to be safe. Lifelong friendships were forged at the same time as very dear friends were lost in the almost nightly bombing raids. My mother taught PE and geography. One of Mother's friends introduced her to a visiting brother home from the Navy on furlough. After the war, my parents married and moved to what must have seemed, after the freedom of London, a small parochial town in the northeast of England, Dad rejoining the family building firm. The town was then a mix of small manufacturing and open-cast mining workforce. Blue collar, we would call it now. Rows of back-to-back miners' cottages with outside privies. Much poverty, especially during the strikes, and very low incomes, with small pockets of affluence from those in professions, in management, or for what appeared to me, those leading the union activities. My father did not understand my mother's wish to play tennis. "We don't do that here," he said. My mother was not of the staying-at-home variety, but also by now she was over 30 years old. And the war had changed women. She had a profession, she had a talent with which she could help pay off their mortgage, and she began to look for a teaching job. Eventually she managed to get a post because the area where the job was so poor they were desperate for anyone to come there to teach. 2 bus rides and over an hour and a half each way. Even when she afforded to buy them a small van to help Dad with his work, my father refused to drive her. She wanted to work, she had to make the journey. 2 miscarriages before my sister was born, and then she really did have to stop work. The working class northern social culture would not allow her to continue to work with a small baby at home. Before I was even born, they knew my father would die. Having survived the sinking of his ship in the Med in the war, the damage from the oil he had ingested from swimming for what seemed like hours before he was rescued had damaged his kidneys irreparably. Endless hospital treatment could not stop his death when I was 5 and my sister just 7 years old. My mother was blamed for not nursing her sick husband at home, but she had seen the future need for a single parent to earn a living. So when offered a post at a local school, they were absolutely desperate for a PE teacher, she put me, aged just 2 years old, into full-time nursery and went back to work, letting my father be cared for many miles away by his sister. It must have been a painful and excruciating time in her life, not just being aware she would lose her husband after such a short marriage, but be left to care for 2 little girls in a town which seemed to her to be then a cultural wilderness. She helped found an orchestra, badgering away at the local music master to lead and conduct a miscellaneous and, I have to say, a confusing group of musicians. She contributed to the creation of 2 now well-renowned choirs and became a founding member and patron of the Derwent Reservoir Sailing Club. She helped change her community, and those who lived in it were inspired. 10 years after my father died, after many applications for more senior posts, it was a very chaste education authority who had to face that same resilient woman who, about to be refused yet another promotion, threatened legal action for sexual discrimination if they did not give her the job at the same index-linked salary and pension over a much less qualified, less experienced man. They gave her the job. In Michael Norton's words, never say that you can't do something, or that something seems impossible, or that something can't be done, no matter how discouraging or harrowing it may be. Instead, build your personal resilience and tackle the challenge head-on. Resilience is an active process, a shifting balance between vulnerability and resilience. And if you can maintain your equilibrium, an individual can theoretically manage any situation that comes along. We can build up our personal resilience from reflecting on our experiences, our attitudes, on people and their reactions, to situations we encounter, to the challenges we face and our reaction to them. Reflecting too on the challenges others have faced. Resilience can be nurtured and developed if we focus on doing whatever it takes to assess our past and our current reality. Resilience is the ability of an individual to positively adjust to adversity. In the face of adversity, resilient leaders stay positive about the future. They believe something desirable can come from the setbacks, but they also know nothing is guaranteed. If we focus on remaining true to our personal values, maintaining a strong sense of personal efficacy, and if we invest our personal energy wisely, we can become more resilient. Resilient leaders act on the courage of their convictions. Convictions without corresponding actions are nothing more than promises unfulfilled. If we focus on being value-driven instead of event-driven, we can create more resilience, because events drain our resilience and those we serve if a response to those events is based purely on what is politically expedient in the circumstances. Strong leaders need a safe haven to talk about difficulties, situations and issues. They need the ability to discuss strategies for moving through the adversity in a healthy way. You need to build that resilience by seeking mentoring relationships, people who can help and support you, by achieving life balance and some sense of spirituality, by developing positive emotions, ensuring personal growth, by learning the art and science of reflection and allowing the time for self-reflection in your professional as well as your personal lives. Resilience allows us to achieve, and resilience allows us to complete our self-entity. For if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 impostors just the same, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and you will be resilient, my son. Thank you.